be passing around. This is the name and email list. So if you're already on the email list, if you received an email from me today, even if you're not on this, then you're on my email list. If you didn't, I suppose that's sort of self-explanatory. Please give me your name and email, and that'll allow me to, if you have an email, you don't have to, of course, but I always will send at least one email prior to the next class with whatever, summary, thought, preview, rah-rahs, all that good stuff. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah. So, wisdom is about our capacity to see. The word prajna at the heart of this class, right? This class is called Embracing Prajna. Prajna is one of the three modes of training in the kind of classic Buddhist designation of our path of training. There's a threefold path of training. Prajna, the study of wisdom, or the practice of wisdom. Samadhi, which just means concentration, meditation, the practice of that. And then the third is Shila, sometimes pronounced Sila, but I think the proper Sanskrit pronunciation, because I speak Sanskrit so fluently, is Shila. And that is often translated as ethics or morality, or the ethical conduct, or discipline. That one's kind of the ethical one is the hardest one to translate. Isn't that funny? Mm-hmm. And actually this, starting with this class, this whole spring, will be kind of structuring our Tuesday evening classes around that threefold training path. So after these three classes, then once the term starts on February 12th, that following Tuesday, GKA will be teaching a series of 6 classes on Samadhi. And then when she finishes that, then I'll be finishing up the term teaching again on Tuesday, and I'll be doing another version of my Shila class, my class on ethics or conduct or whatever. And it may be like what I taught last year. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. So we're covering the whole training path. And that's important to think of prajna, wisdom, in that context, that wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is about our capacity to see, to understand. So, people, we talked a little bit about this last time. And I'll yak a bit, and then we'll discuss-ity discuss a bit, and chant-ity chant a bit, and then card-ity card a bit. We'll do all of that. So I won't be talking forever, but last week we talked about how, there's often people make the distinction between wisdom and knowledge. And I was talking about how knowledge might be understood to be a collection of contents. So I'm studying, I've got my anyone do Duolingo? Am I the only Duolingo person? My stepson is studying Swedish. He's so practical. But I'm studying Spanish. And, the division in Spanish between saber and conocer. So two types of knowing, of two types of knowledge. That saber is all about like knowing facts or knowing how to do something, facts and skills. Conocer, that's about our familiarity, our acquaintance with the world, like knowing a person, which isn't like knowing a fact. It's not like knowing how to do something, but it's knowledge, right? But either way, conocer, saber, these are actually all about how our body, heart, mind takes in information about the world, right? How self relates to other. Knowledge is about contents, and it's about that relationship of self to other. Wisdom is about our capacity to have that relationship, our capacity to be in relationship. And it's a practice. It's the practice that in a few minutes we'll chant the Heart Sutra. It's the practice that the bodhisattva or saint being of compassion. Wisdom is what compassion practices, actually, oddly enough. And last week we also talked about this very classic way of describing wisdom as this capacity to see, this practice of seeing, this practice of trying to see clearly, to see the world rightly, to be in right relationship with the world. We talked about the classic teaching about wisdom, the practice of wisdom, in terms of the 5 mystic eyes. So in our tradition, like many traditions, we're not alone in this. When we talk about the practice of wisdom, we think about wisdom often as a female, as some, female presenting deity that we can venerate. And so there she is, or if you get a copy of this book, The Mother of the Buddhas, this is Les Hickson's trippy translation of many of the Prajna Paramita Sutras. This is a Javanese statue of, that image is based on, of the personification of wisdom as a female, the perfection of wisdom, Prajna Paramita, which just means the perfection of wisdom. It can be translated in many ways. Kogan was talking about paramita and other ways to translate that word, but it can be translated in many ways, but its simplest might just be to say perfection of wisdom. We're not the only tradition to personify wisdom. I'm thinking of your birth name, Esho, Sophia, right? That woman's name is a name from the Greek word for wisdom, Sophia, a deified being. In Judeo-Christian tradition, often wisdom is also personified in a female way. And it's interesting that this exists in so many world traditions, this wanting to talk about this practice of right, clear seeing in this kind of archetypally female way. I just want to put that forward. It's interesting. I don't, and then in our tradition, we go further and we talk about, and again, this is like poetic language, how we hold it, what we do with it depends. For me, I feel this very deeply. I feel the kind of what it means to use this language very deeply. We go further in our personifying of the perfection of wisdom, not only calling wisdom female, but talking about wisdom as a mother. And as not just any old mother, but the mother of everything and the mother of awakening. It's interesting that we do that, that we end up trying to body forth this capacity or practice. And so one of the things that gets said about this mother of the Buddhas is that she possesses the Buddha eye, the name of our temple, Buddha eye. And I'm wearing one of the, I think they're charms. Are they still on the, if you haven't gotten one of these charms, these talismans, these tokens, I can't remember the Japanese word for them. Does anyone remember? Omamori. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. Omamori. If you haven't gotten one of these, I encourage you to take one tonight. You can take one from the altar itself. So our Dharma brother Genki forged these, created the image. It's an image of Prajna Paramita on one side, and then it's the seal for Buddha eye for our temple on the other, and it says Buddha eye, Buddha mother. It's lovely. So we talk about her as, and is this making sense? I'm wanting to like lay out all of the symbolism and what you do with this. I encourage you to be curious about it and to let it kind of roll around in you and not just say, oh, it represents something. It's just a symbol, but to really like, oh, what is that? One of the things that we say, okay, so she's the mother of all, the perfection of wisdom, this practice of clear seeing. She is the eye of the Buddha. And she's the mother or the womb of the Buddhas, all Buddhas, of awakening itself. And when you think about like the imagery here, right, a womb, this dark, open space that yields everything. You think about an eye, this dark, open space that takes in everything. So gives forth, takes in this sense of darkness that both receives light, light and gives life, right? This is in the imagery of Prajna Paramita. And that imagery seems important. So we call her Buddha Eye, Buddha Mother. And that teaching, though, of the Buddha Eye is that the Buddha Eye is actually comprised of 5 eyes. Okay, the 5 mystic eyes. And this is where the teaching gets really practical, actually, because it turns out when we talk about the 5 eyes that we can practice seeing when we lay out this rubric of the 5 eyes. So we talked about this last week, right? The first eye, and then Kogan referenced it too on Sunday. The first eye is, does anyone remember the very first eye, the first level? We can think of this as a kind of ascending, broadening, mind-blowing way of understanding seeing, understanding itself. The first level is what? What's the first eye? Does anyone remember?
Physical.
The physical eye. Right? And we talked about that last week. We all start, even if, I'm really super blind, although I forget that I am because I wear, disposable contact lenses all the time. So I think that I can see. Although as I get older, it turns out even my contact lenses don't work anymore, but that's another story. But I'm super blind, right? And my grandmother was actually blind. And I've thought all my life, I've wondered, will I become blind? So we're not talking necessarily about that organ that receives light and forms ideas. But we're talking about all the ways in which, as embodied, incarnated, whatever the heck this thing is, we enter into relationship with the world from a certain vantage point, right? So I encounter the world, I come into being as a self in the world, in relationship to the world, through a Myobun size frame, right? The physical eye is just how I know the world through my body, basically. And when I say body, I'm not excluding the mind, but through my, just, how I understand stuff, just all the time. And that, because I'm partial and I exist in a certain place at a certain time and I have a certain life trajectory and I've gone through the stuff I've gone through and I have biases and prejudices and all sorts of stuff, baggage, and because I have a body that can't see everything all at once, even if I turn around really fast, I can't see everything all at once. The physical eye is partial. And one of the classic teachings about it is that the physical eye is so weak, it can't even see through a piece of paper. We can't even, it's all surface. And this is kind of metaphorical language because it's obvious, I don't just see surfaces, but there is a very powerful way in which I can't see through things, right? I see what, I see what's presenting itself in this moment from this direction, both literal direction and also just the direction that I tend to be oriented right now is, a white cis woman living in Eugene, Oregon in 2020. You know what I mean? I'm in my position. I am where I am. So the physical eye is the starting point, but it's limited and finite. And yet it is the starting point of wisdom. But wisdom is a training process. So the teaching is to say, okay, well, Buddha Eye, Buddha Mother, how do we have the fullness of sight? How do we see clearly, fully clearly, what is? The next step is the divine eye. Right? And although divine sounds like really fancy and special, not so special. It's something we all have access to. Because the divine eye, one way to think about the divine eye is to think that the divine eye is what is the way that knowing is possible for me when I abstract from the particularities of my condition. I'm embodied and embedded in my time and space, but there are all sorts of ways that just really ordinary ways that all of us are able to abstract from this total embodiment. In big ways and small ways. So small ways might be as simple as, like in the Beatles song, try to see it my way, just actually listening to another person talk about their experiences and oh, when I said that, you heard this. Oh, we can do that. We can do that mental work. But one of the things that makes that mental work possible, going back even more basic in the divine eye, is that we form concepts. We have ideas. We have language. we have symbols. So I'm not just completely embedded in the present moment perspective of this body, heart and mind right here. I can actually have ideas. I can think, what am I going to eat after I come home from the Zendo? Very important question. Right? So we have concepts, and our concepts allow us to round out our experience. So I can have concept, and one thing that the concepts can do, and this goes back to that classic statement that the physical eye can't see through things, it can't see the underside of a piece of paper, is actually, I can know that there's an underside to this piece of paper because I have a concept of it. Right? Are any of you artists? Do any of you draw or paint? Yeah. I remember when I was like, I don't, but I remember when I was like in grade school, and they were, back in the days when there were still things like art class, and they were showing us about perspective drawing. And I realized actually, and this is where the divine eye gets us into trouble, because if you don't know better and you're thinking, I want to draw glass, and the glass is a circle, right? And then I try to draw glass that way. Well, that's not what the glass looks like. So the divine eye sometimes gets in the way of our physical eye, right? We have ideas about things, and then we have to remember, oh, wait a minute, that's not how it is actually appearing to me. It's very interesting. The divine eye doesn't always help us. Sometimes it gets in the way, that we see the roundness of things when we really want to talk about, well, no, how is it for you? It's like if you're having a conversation with someone about, something terrible that's happened to them, and they take this really big, broad view of it. Like, well, I think it all happened for the best. And you're like, no, come on. It was shitty. How do you feel right now? Like, oh, yeah. Right. But most of a human life of trying to be wise, most of it is spent juggling between the divine eye and the physical eye, our partiality versus a broader picture. Politically, the divine eye is incredibly important. I think of the divine eye politically as having a lot to do with the way that we decenter ourselves. So even just saying pronouns here, it's like, oh, I'm, cis woman. Like, I should actually decenter that. Like, name that as a thing, not just be in the physical eye, but to have a broader perspective. Does that make sense? So politically, the divine eye is all about getting a little purchase on our biases and our partiality, having a little bit of a rounder relationship to things. But again, it's not so simple, because sometimes the divine eye, we just take shortcuts, we fill in the gaps, and that can actually contribute to our bias. We presume that we know the picture, the big picture, when we're actually just stuck in our own narrow examples. And then there's the stuff we did with the cards, because another way to think about the divine eye is to think about all the stuff that we know without knowing that we know it, and to think about the movement of intuition, right? And we can train our intuition. We can get better at gaining access to the stuff that's kind of in the shadows, maybe psychologically and emotionally in the shadows. So in the same way that the divine eye is all about how I know that there's something behind me even when I can't see it, how I round out my gaze in a physical sense, the divine eye might be also how I come to see what's in the shadows for me, because it's stuff that's scary, or a part of me that I don't want to pay attention to, or something that is a little bit on the edges of consciousness. As I was saying, the bulk of a human life, I think, is spent pinging between the physical eye and the divine eye, our partial experience and a kind of broader perspective. That's sort of by way of recapping what we talked about last week, but also kind of rounding it out a little bit. Any thoughts, comments? Does this make sense? Does this resonate? Does this any on that?
I really appreciate the reframing of, in my mind, of the divine eye, and wondering how I can use that word, all the places that it's used in our cultural and cosmological context.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that's going to reframe and turn my reorient myself, but
Yeah.
I feel like that's important. And I feel like tonight we were speaking on that in a way that like concepts are divine, like symbols are divine,
Yeah.
like writing, like that sort of like higher level of communication is an act of like divinity.
It's, where do the gods live in so many religious traditions? Where do they live? Well, in the books, but like, and even within monotheistic kind of naive imagining, where, I'll give you a hint, it's not down there. Right? The gods are in the mountains, the gods are in the heavens, God, even in a Judeo-Christian setting, the topography of wisdom, the Godhead is on high, right? One way to think about that is look at the vantage point from on high. Yeah, this is about abstraction, our capacity to rise above the particularities of our experience, to see the roundness of what we take in partial terms, to gain a broad perspective. So, I was mentioning Sophia, the tradition that gave us the word philosophy, lovers of wisdom, Greek philosophy, right? Plato says, okay, everything that we see in the world, these particular things, we recognize them as things, we create them, we know them because they are instantiation of divine ideas. Even the word seeing in Greek is the origin of our word idea, ideion. It's to see. And so the myth of knowing that Socrates and Plato writing about Socrates, the myth of knowing that comes from that tradition is, how do we know the world? It's because before we were incarnated, we were reeling through the skies, following the gods, and we were shown everything, all the essences, all the true forms of the world. And then we were incarnated. We lost that perfect, complete perspective, and we came down to earth. And now we create these kind of simulacra, these imitations of the true essences. So this is a very common way that human cultures have put to shape and story what it is to know and what wisdom is about. This practice of what the gods can see, first of all. So that's why it's the divine eye. And in Buddhism, we talk about celestial beings. Gods in Buddhism, they're nothing special. They just live on mountains, like us. They eat better food than we do, basically. I mean, that's a little tongue in cheek, but does that make sense? But it's also, and I sort of said this in passing, I love playing with cards. I love playing with tarot. The word divination, right? This is all of the same. This is all the same stuff, right? Being able to see with the divine eye, knowing stuff that kind of goes beyond our partial knowing. But not because it's magic, not because it's super special, it's just human. We all can do it. So, this is all about the world of forms, the world of what can be grasped, the world of what can be known, that can be held, named, identified, that which can be an object or subject. But wisdom isn't just about the world of forms, it's also about the world of formlessness. And if you remember back to last week when we were reading Thich Nhat Hanh talking about the Heart Sutra, if I'm saying that the divine eye is about how humans know things, about how artists know things, how scientists know things, Thich Nhat Hanh says, yeah, if we look at this piece of paper with the eye of a poet, he says, we'll see that it contains everything. So there is something about the divine eye that if we really look at the world, we'll actually start to see that the world is interconnected in a way that we can't quite grasp. So practicing the physical eye and the divine eye inevitably takes us to the third eye, which is the Prajna eye. Not Prajna with a big P, not that Prajna, not Maha Prajna Paramita, but Prajna, just the next step in growing a Buddha eye. So I guess what I'm saying here is, you know, if you practice your divine eye long enough, deep enough, you'll start to realize, oh, it's not just what I can know, it's also the possibility that I can know what I can't know. Or it's not just the finite world, it's the infinite world. It's the world of everything. I can form an idea of that, but how do I see it? How do I see that world? Does that question make sense at all? How do I see that which we can form with our divine eye, an idea of the world that goes beyond what we can grasp? But how can we know that world if knowing is about grasping? That's the question. Did that question make sense? Sort of.
It makes sense in the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Okay, there we go. We're good. But I mean, this is like we humans with our regular old capacities. We're like, oh, I can form the idea of the infinite. But what does it mean to know the infinite? Like, can I know the infinite? Can I clearly see that which goes beyond the finite? That's where the Prajna eye comes in. And fortunately, we chant literally every day, either in Sino-Japanese or in English. We chant a sutra that's all about knowing that which goes beyond the divine eye. And so this is where I thought, last week we chanted, let's chant again this week, the Heart Sutra. Did we chant last week? No, last week we didn't chant. Okay. But this week we will. Does everyone have a copy of it? And yes, I would like instrumentation. I put an echo. Let's do it. So here's the thing: if we're going to chant the sutras, we're going to actually chant the sutras. So we'll do this with Mokugyo, with the fish head drum. That's a fish. Did you know that?
I guess I never asked. It just made an applied assumption to this.
When the koi reaches the waterfall, it turns into a dragon.
So there you go. So we're both right. Yeah. So this is the 25 line. In English, it's more than 25 lines, but the 25 line version of everything you want to know about wisdom. Oh. And making your life more complicated. Okay.
Heart of great perfect wisdom, Sutra. And deeply practicing Prajna Paramita, clearly saw that all five aggregates empty and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself forms sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there are no forms, sensations, perceptions, formations, or consciousness, no eye, ear, no sound, body, or mind, no sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind, no realm of sight, and so forth, down to no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, and so forth, down to neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death, no suffering, no cause, no sensation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment, with nothing to attain. A bodhisattva relies on Prajna, paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on Prajna, paramita, and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know the Prajna, paramita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the Prajna, paramita mantra, the mantra that says Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parsam, Gate, Bodhi, Swaha. Having chanted in the heart of great perfect wisdom sutra, we reverently dedicate the merits of our recitation to Manjushri Bodhisattva, our protector in this practice, who guides us with a flaming sword and fearlessly cuts the path through delusion. May we with all beings realize the Buddha way. Space and time, honor ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Prajna, paramita.
Hey, so as we were saying last week, this sutra begins by telling us what prajna is, and says, basically points to it being a practice of clear seeing, of a seeing of emptiness. And then it actually enacts the practice, or one version of it, one incredibly potent version of it. And one that isn't just, again, I always find it helpful to think in comparative terms. Like, this isn't just Buddhism's story. This is like what humans do in a lot of world traditions. There's one very potent practice enacted in this sutra, and it's in all those lists, and the word that is repeated over and over and over again in the sutra. And that's the word no. Right? Did you all hear that? So there's a little handout, because it wouldn't be a Myobun class without some trees dying. So I had this image on the handout last week, but we ended up only talking about John Lennon and Paul McCartney, which, plenty. But this is an image of the bodhisattva of wisdom. So one way to think about, is there not enough?
We can share.
Okay. Is there sharing that can take place?
Did you email us also?
I didn't, but I will. So, these bodhisattvas, it's confusing. There are these layers of beings that we venerate, and we have these relationships to. There's Prajna Paramita. She sits to the left of the Buddha on our main altar. But then right over, he's over there now, there's Manjushri. And that's one depiction of Manjushri. He watches over us, the bodhisattva of wisdom. He watches over us as we sit in samadhi, as we sit zazen, as we meditate. He looks very calm right there. But a whole bunch of the depictions of Manjushri have him like this, holding a sword that is, yes, not just something that cuts, it also has flame, right? This flaming sword. And I think about Manjushri as the being that is, he's a bodhisattva. I'm a bodhisattva with a little b. We're all bodhisattvas. We're all on the path. We're all beings of awakening. And he's like hanging out right with us, helping us in our practice of prajna. Prajna is understood in terms of the prajna eye. This eye that is trying to see the emptiness, the formlessness of things. So this quote here, which is from the Tibetans are very good in talking about these various bodhisattvas. The Tibetan Buddhists they get the kind of imagery in a way that I think Zen people can be a little bit shy of. We're like, we don't really want too many fancy pictures. We like to wear black and stuff. We're not so colorful. So this is from a really pretty good website. It says, Prajna is like a sword that sharply and precisely cuts through the surface of appearances and self, as solid and dualistic, leading into the vast, spacious expanse, the abiding, ever-present awareness that realizes, sees, and encompasses that, the all-encompassing wisdom eyes of the Dharmakaya that know and see all appearances as one and the same, as waves rising and falling in a vast ocean. This is the Prajna eye. It sees the formlessness and oneness of all things. All of the distinctions, all the things that say, this is me, this is you, all of that cut through. All of that delusion cut through, that sense of separateness cut through. Sometimes people talk about Manjushri's sword as a sword that cuts us into one, as opposed to the way swords cut into two. So this is Manjushri with his sword, which is also us sitting zazen, by the way, Manjushri. Manjushri through his sword is showing us how to practice the Prajna eye, how to cut through the sense of dualism, how to cut through the sense of appearance, how to cut through our sense that this is solid, how to cut through our sense of self-other, how to cut through all that. And then in the Heart Sutra, we get a depiction of what that means. So all of those lists, we've got the 5 aggregates that make a being: forms, sensations, perceptions, formations, consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No sight. Those are all the 5 aggregates that the Bodhisattva of compassion is seeing clearly the emptiness of. And then we get like the 4 Noble Truths. Manjushri cuts through the 4 Noble Truths, right? There's no suffering, right? In 4 Noble Truths, suffering, cause, cessation, path. There's no cause, there's no cessation, there's no path. There's no knowledge, there's no attainment. There's no death, there's no old age. And there's also not those things. Once you've cut through and you said, this doesn't exist, well, now you've affirmed something. If I say, there's no I, then I've kind of affirmed the no I-ness. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So now I have to say, and there's also not no I. right? Are y'all with me? This is what in Western theology we call the via negativa. This is another fancy word for that is apophasis, which just means denial. This is the work in like monotheistic religions of saying, how do we talk about the infinity that is God? Well, if you say anything about God, that's ridiculous. God is bigger than that. So the only way to approach God is a path of negation. No, no, talking about, right? Does this make sense? The via negativa. Pretty powerful stuff. We just cut any affirmation that we want to put forward. Right? So this is a lovely little poem by a 20th century Welsh poet. He's an Anglican minister, R.S. Thomas. Says, why no, I never thought other than that God is that great absence in our lives, the empty silence within, the place where we go seeking, not in hope to arrive or find. He keeps the interstices in our knowledge, the darkness between stars. His are the echoes we follow, the footprints he has just left. We put our hands in his side, hoping to find it warm. We look at people and places as though he had looked at them too, but missed the reflection. Why no? I never thought of it.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. I never thought other. I love that it starts why no, because this is the path of the via negativa. Why no? Like, I never thought other than that God is that great absence in our lives, the empty silence within, the place where we go seeking, not in hope to arrive or find. He keeps the interstices in our knowledge, the darkness between stars. His are the echoes we follow, the footprints he has just left. We put our hands in his side, hoping to find it warm. We look at people and places as though he had looked at them too, but missed the reflection. I think for some of us, this is a familiar path, even if we've never studied theology, but this like way of kind of approaching truth by saying, I can't get there. If I could state it, then it's not the truth that I'm seeking. Like if I could grasp it, it's not the thing that I'm seeking. So I think for a lot of, am I projecting here? I think that this is, for many of us, a way that we are on the path of being seekers, that anything that we put forward as that which we want to follow, it's like if I think I know it is, I'm fooling myself. And so we try to hold open a space inside ourselves for something that we can't name. I can't tell if this is just am I just yakking, or is this, yeah. And yet, it's really, the via negativa is really hard because, in this poem, we could spend a lot of time on this poem, but we won't. This poem demonstrates it too, because it's like, even that first, I never thought other than that, like there's a kind of double negative there. Like the minute we try to I know that the truth is bigger than anything I could grasp, I'm still holding on to something. I'm still forming a concept of something. It's really hard. It's a really hard path, the via negativa, to really do, right? But our tradition does it.
One of the things I remember growing up, especially in like writing classes, I would use double negatives a lot.
Yeah.
And I was constantly having my teachers be like, no, like if you're gonna negate something in that way, why don't you just affirm it? It's like, because that's not the point. Like, yeah. I'm negating this negation. Like, I'm not trying to affirm anything.
It's a practice, and I think that's the point, is that it's the practice is to keep letting go of whatever we put forward as knowledge, to keep, and this is why Manjushri is the bodhisattva that presides over over our zazen, because it's the same practice in zazen of just anytime something comes up, we let it go. So it's a practice of a kind of letting go, right? Anytime I identify an affirmation, let me negate it. Let me not hold on to it. Anytime I think that I know, let me, no, I don't know. It's an ongoing process. It's not knowledge. It's be a negativa way to say things. It's not knowledge. It's a practice of wisdom that's continually letting go. You know, continually saying, the Four Noble Truths, not the Four Noble Truths, and not the Four Noble Truths, and not the Four Noble Truths, and not. I don't know how many. We can keep going all day with that. The sword can keep cutting, and isn't this kind of? I mean, this is something GK I'm sure we'll explore more, because all of these practices blend together. But isn't this kind of the practice of zazen, where you keep you're like let it go, and then it's back again. Back again. The sword keeps cutting, keeps having to cut, not because we're at risk for wholeness, but precisely because we're continually dividing our world into self and other, into knowledge instead of wisdom. And so we gotta keep cutting back to one, back to one, back to one, back to one. There's another way our tradition does the via negativa, which I think is even more potent. Just noticed there's a hole in the there's a Buddha eye, right? And it's related, and this is where we get to use cards again. So I think the most vibrant way that we practice the no in our tradition is through in Rinzai Zen. It would be like through koan practice. So that word no in the Heart Sutra, it's mu or fu, which is the same thing. And mu is very famous in our tradition for the language of koans. So this very famous koan is like one of these teaching stories that you kind of like, how can this be? It's trying to double negation your mind. The story of Chao Chu's dog. A monk asked Chao Chu, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? Chao Chu replied, not, mu. Does an oak also have Buddha nature or not? The master said, it has. The student said, then when will it become a Buddha? The master said, when the sky falls to the earth. The student said, when will the sky fall to the earth? The master said, when the oak tree becomes a Buddha. So these are stories, these koans. They enact a kind of practice of via negativa by confounding our ability to hold on. Wait, does everything has Buddha nature? Does a dog have it or not? Not. Wait, how can a dog not have Buddha nature? It does. Wait, does an oak tree have Buddha? It does. When will it become a Buddha? When the sky fall. When will the sky fall here? When the oak tree becomes a Buddha. What? Koans within Rinzai Zen, in Soto Zen, that same impulse is just us asking questions. It's just all the ways our tradition, Soto Zen, this is a Soto Zen school here, all the ways our tradition invites us to go, what? Right? To open into not knowing. That's the Prajna eye. The Prajna eye opens us into not knowing. Does that make sense? So the divine eye opened us into a kind of wholeness, like, intuition. Let me grasp the whole. Prajna is like, that whole, W-H-O-L-E, is an H-O-L-E. Okay? So we're going to play with cards again. If you were here last week, here's, okay, we'll have one group of 3, but that's okay. So if you were here last week and you see your card and it still speaks to you, and if you pick 3, you only get 1, Toshi, you can pick your card from last week, but the prompt, if you weren't here, you're just going to pick a card, and if 2 people want the same card, wrestle it out and figure it out. But you're looking for a card that speaks to kind of like what's kind of gnarly for you right now. Whatever, like what are you chewing on? What is like not clear to you? Where there's like something like a question in your life that you don't really understand. Maybe it's painful, maybe it's not painful, maybe it's a small thing, maybe it's a big thing, maybe you don't even have words for it, but a card that somehow, don't overthink it, a card that somehow speaks to that gnarliness in your life. So everybody go get a card. And if you're listening in, you can do this at home just by doing some free writing in terms of what's gnarly for you right now. So we'll do a structured where folks here are doing work in small groups. If you're listening in, you can do this as a journaling free writing exercise. Yeah, just one. No, Toshin picked 3 last week. I was giving you a hard time. So just one. Yeah, what's gnarly? If gnarly isn't, what feels like a kind of like a knot? K-N-O-T, not N-O-T. Whoa.
It'd be funnier if it was.
I know that would be perfect. And the cards that we're looking at, if you're listening online, the cards that we're looking at are Deborah Koff Chapin's soul cards, and the website for a gallery of them is her touch drawing website. So you can view these cards online as well. Yes, they're called, yes, and also a website for them. And I'll send out.
My card's a little bit extreme.
Okay, no, all these cards are kind of a little bit extreme. Okay, so here's the goal, okay? Or the game or whatever it is. So we'll have like first one group of 3 and then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Is that right? 2, 2, 2, 2, 3. Okay. And in your group, maybe whoever has a kind of an impulse to, whoever has kind of a yen or a yearn to be the person on the hot seat, we'll do it with one, and we'll see how the timing goes. So someone be willing to be the person on the hot seat in your group. And when I ring the bell, just start talking about your card. Okay, and talk about your card until I ring the bell again. And what you're talking about, we don't do it yet. Wait, there's more. What you're talking about is what's at stake for you right now.
What's at stake?
Yeah, what's gnarly? Just what's alive? What is this card? Why? And then when I ring the bell again, the person who's listening to you, and listeners are listening very intently. Okay. Ask the question, what's at stake for you? And then the talker talk more. And then I ring the bell and the listener asks the question again, what's at stake for you? And if in your listening another question emerges, well, you can ask that instead. But the questions are just Manjushri's sword. Does that make sense? Just poking to get people to talk again and more. Does this make sense as an assignment? So we'll do 1, talk, 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 ring bell, ask question, talk, 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 ring bell, ask question, talk, talk, talk. So we'll ask the questions twice. And these will be relatively brief sessions. And then we'll see where we are. We might do it with other cards, other members in the group. Okay. You guys ready? Go.
Well, there's like potential for a lot of change in my life. There's like regulatory stuff around.
Reminds me of
Which I kind of like forward to. So we're going to have just like employees, property,
differentiating between
just a lot of stuff. Part of me is to go get my get sprint red
specifically in regards
yeah, okay, it's done.
be
So So yeah, I mean, I kind of like, I didn't really see the mouth.
Yeah.
I just saw the spiral, and I was just like, you know, because in some ways it's like there's some fear, you know, but in other ways I'm like, maybe that's me sort of like, yeah, you know, I think,
Yeah. Well, it could be.
yeah, yeah. So, so it's a little bit of extreme, I think. Because I feel like it's more like, hard. Well, I mean, this feels really dark. Yeah, it feels darker than like what I anticipated it will actually be. You know, so. But there's like a lighter color. Like I like that. Yeah, and this seems very credible, and you know, it's like it could be like there's fear attached to a lot of change. My livelihood is like I've done it 10 years. Wow. No, it's not my decision. Yeah, it's like I have to stay
So come to silence where we are. And as the listeners or listener asks the question, some version of what's at stake for you, really hear that question and respond to that from where you are right now. So go.
What's at stake is my consciousness. But what I'm realizing is that the more I let go of my righteous,
you know, like future financial stability,
the more I let that go.
but I mean, like, I don't look at the history of this, you know, it's like,
Old friends, old
that,
partners, all of them. Ever still let go.
I don't know, it's like kind of an opportunity, but like,
All these things are
I'm so comfortable. You know, I'm just comfortable
it's actually
with
really beautiful experience.
what I'm doing, so like, you know, I could see it as like my comfort piece. And like, my
Just
routine.
at a very topics. And like perhaps it's one topic. It's from the back here.
But,
It's
that's kind of how I look at it.
I mean, maybe as a friend.
This is quite figured out this different parts. Like it's
Not exactly. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, for this last time, listeners, if you've been trying to help the speaker answer the question, don't. Just let them talk. And speakers, let yourself be really poked. Okay? When the listener asks the question, some version of what's at stake, listener really, really ask. Really ask. Bring all of your intention into asking that question. And then as you listen, bring all of your intention into helping drive deeper. Okay, does this make sense? Okay, go. When you
Okay, good.
Are we switching now?
no, you're still one more
Still
time.
going?
So, yeah, but Kyle, don't talk to him so much. Colin, you just talk.
Okay. So this was kind of ran differently. It was kind of before this news came about. That one, you know, that one was like more about me, you know, personally, like,
They're still holding on.
you know, like get out of this
they feel the
you know,
care.
the fundamental, not like escaping, but like whoever Artem is, like whoever she is, with world perception. That's usually
It's fine.
consider that
on them, you know,
all the
and
time.
I don't really certainly know why it's
Gain a perspective to a certain extent.
They're so loud about
this is more like, oh,
Usually.
now we're maybe they could be
So, what's at stake? Talk about this. It was pretty much. I remember that. And I'm not sure if she's just deluding herself.
yeah, it's true. Here, so I can everything, you know, like my
Yeah.
Let's come back as a circle. So, what happened, if anything? What was that like? If anything? Yeah.
I had a recent trauma. Not loss of total loss of a friend, but a betrayal of trust. It was really nice to talk about it.
Yeah.
The card was very significant.
Yeah.
Do
To
you want
start.
to talk about it?
Would can you, in a pithy way, not getting into the narrative maybe, but what's at stake? Yeah.
What's at stake is the version of myself who is best friends with this other person. Whether I should leave that person who is best friends with this person behind or not.
Yeah. You know, when we bring forward like a life gnarly thing, whether it's big or little, whether it's trauma or it's just drama, you know, when we bring it forward and we are invited to question it, inevitably at some place down the line, what becomes up for grabs is who we think we are and what we think our world is. Right? Does that make sense? I mean, it's like inevitably, if I'm bringing something forward that I don't really understand, you know, a head scratcher of some sort, or like that feels like I'm stuck in some way or something's stuck, when I really allow myself to question it, to be questioned by it, things can start to unravel. That's why I was sort of like giving, oh no, don't try to answer things here. Let's try to question them. But I don't know if this form worked so well for folks, but what?
Oh, I love this form.
Okay. Yeah. So did it help you get? It was helpful to.
Just to like I'm a writer too, and it's like
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Just to get something onto the page, get something
Yes.
out there into the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
narrate it in some way is helpful.
Yeah.
To really put things in order to separate like what's like delusions of the situation and intuitions.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, actually, that's a little bit like the divine eye that we're talking about, like how I like getting it out there, so I can see it. And then it becomes possible, I think, to bring the question forward, to be questioned by it. You know, if I have to see it, but if all I do is see it, no, there it is. Now I got it. Now I understand it. Then somehow it still slips away, or it can still slip away. Yeah. Thank you. Other experiences with this? Was it juicy? Was it?
I wonder. Yeah, I notice how easy it is to like dry up when you're sharing with people about something of great heart matter.
Yeah.
If you start sharing it first and it feels really watery and tears come, and then something just like distances, and it's really hard to stay close to the question, what's at stake, and feel honest about it without becoming like broadly philosophical.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you just like kind of missed
You missed
the meaty heart
the same time, it's challenging not to respond either interpretation.
Yes.
or
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah. So what is it to listen? What is it to listen to and to really let someone, I mean, this is taking us toward, the listener's position here is taking us toward the Dharma eye that we'll talk about next week, like to really just hold without trying to fix or shape or do something. Yeah, it's hard. So what did you do with that difficulty?
And waited.
Yeah. I mean, it's seems small, but it's huge, right? Did anyone, when they were listening, were you carrying your card in your heart too? Did you find, was your card present? So, any other things? Colin, you were struggling because your card was too dark for your experience.
Yeah, it was a little dark. I mean, it jumped out at me and it kept calling to me. So I decided I picked it, but I like this. I kind of like the spiral idea, but I was like, and then I did find my other card, but it was like something else before this other hit thing happened last week. So I was like, well, I gotta pick that one. Now I'm about to have 3 cards this year, so no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just got like there's a potential big change in my life coming up, and so there's like, my comfort is at stake. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the divine eye looks for answers. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The Prajna eye is looking for questions. So I want us to take, we've got like 5 minutes left for class. I want us to take 2 minutes where I'm not going to say anything and just picking up the card in front of you that you've chosen and just seeing if there's a question that arises from it. Does that make sense? Let's just looking at your card. What is its question? And just to take into heart that our tradition really does imagine that the approach toward healing and wholeness and love and all the good stuff, that approach is the approach of the question. At the end of our practice term, all the way in May, we will perform a ritual that some of you have participated in before called Shosan, where the abbot steps forward in the place of the Buddha and where anyone in the assembly is invited to step toward him with a question. Yeah, that tradition. We are in this tradition deeply invited to approach awakening in the form of a question. This is making our lives into that whole, HOLE, right? That's what that is. And before we break with singing, chanting, whatever it is that we do, the poly refuges, let's just lapse into silence. And if anyone feels like sharing out loud the question that is arising for them, we can just drop those questions into our silence before we say the poly refuges. So an invitation, if you want to share what question is arising for you from this card, from this practice, in this moment of your life.
Where's my fire?
How can the dramatic difficulty of existing within multiplicity awaken a compassionate heart? What are you hiding from?
Are you taking on too much?